Okay, so back in the ancient days of the 2010s, I really liked this movie called Jurassic Park. Fast forward a decade or so, and it randomly appears in my mind one day like, dinosaurs are kinda cool, I will not lie. If you have ever watched the first Jurassic Park movie, you'd probably be convinced that the biggest baddies on the island would be the dozens of man-eating predators that can game end a human's life in a matter of seconds. Looking back on this movie, however, I had an epiphany, a very random idea, if you will. Perhaps the giant T-Rex or the raptors weren't the biggest threat to the visitors, rather it was the really crappy code that went into the entire park's security.
God damn it! Hate this hacker crap!
Believe it or not, the first Jurassic Park has a lot of ties to programming practices and how crappy some programmers can be. So all of those hours you have spent watching game developers suffer through source code comments or YouTubers becoming a punching bag, well, all of that knowledge applies here to this video today. However, rewind the clock back to the 90s, make the circumstances more life-threatening, and we get Jurassic Park's code. I just put the film into the spotlight, but I'm sorry, I'm going to actually be referring to the original novel instead. There is a reason for this though. The Jurassic Park novel was written by a man named Michael Cray, who is most notable for his sci-fi and techno-thriller novels, and most importantly being the first notable person to use the small penis rule. Cray first published Jurassic Park back in 1990, and much of the computer science aspects of it came from his own experience as a programmer. Back in the 80s, he had taught himself to write in this ancient caveman language called BASIC, published a game, and even started up his own software company. So by the time he had to write about a theme park filled with dinosaurs, Cray did possess enough experience to ground the technology to stuff you would see in the 80s. The novel in this case remains superior over the film mainly because it takes more time to go into the inner workings of the park. Most importantly, more explanation is given to the people who totally fumbled the security. This ultimately does not exist in the film since I highly doubt an average audience wants to sit through 2 hours of how computer nerds suffer, so the film cuts most of that fluff out. Before nitpicking this system to death, I believe it is worth going over how the park should function in theory. The park's infrastructure can be split into two different categories. We first have the general infrastructure, which mainly consists of stuff relating to power management, the feeding systems for the dinos, different rides, and all of the lab equipment. And then we have all of the security measures that have some expenses spared. Jurassic Park's power is essentially hooked up to one grid that is responsible for activating everything that I am about to list next. The power can be accessed via a maintenance shed that is located away from the park's control center. So if the power were to mysteriously go out, luckily you would have a couple hours of backup power. The actual creatures themselves are cared for using these automatic feeding and water systems, which is allegedly meant to provide sustenance every 24 hours. Some park staff do occasionally go out and touch grass, but that's mostly for maintenance. The dinos are mostly cared for through the use of automated systems. To see the dinosaurs, power is also diverted to the tour rides, which use these fancy electric Toyota Land Rovers. The lab people get some pretty special treatment since they hoard 3 Cray XMPs. The people in charge must have had all the money in the world, since these were the most powerful supercomputers at the time of the novel. Let it be known that the supercomputers are only used by the labs only. They don't even get used in the main park. It's not outright stated, but we can guess that the rest of the park runs using different computer systems of some kind. The park security is advertised to include some state-of-the-art stuff. Really advanced, no human involvement, and whatever buzzwords companies like using. All of these features can be managed from the park's main control room. The quest to keep the dinosaurs contained starts with the first barriers, consisting of electric fences and water moats. Isa Nublar contains about 50 miles of electric fencing that output 10,000 volts each. There's also several ways to monitor the dinos, mainly through the use of motion trackers, which apparently cover 92% of the island. The various paddocks also come with video surveillance, just in case the motion sensors don't give enough info. The data from both of these features is used to update a map of the park, which tracks the current position of every single creature. Apparently the park has some type of software which can just straight up analyze a video and get graphs for the physical attributes of each creature. I can't really imagine how that would work implementation-wise, especially for computers from the 80s, but it'll just have to pass. Besides this motion sensor and video data, there's also a type of backup method for keeping track of the dinosaurs. There exists a tracking system where the computer can display the current, well, not current, actually, the expected number of dinosaurs on the island. This tally of dinos is updated about every 15 minutes. This separate tracking software isn't explained thoroughly, but it can be assumed that every creature has some type of device implanted in them at birth. So to sum it up, we basically have a never-before-seen amusement park that heavily involves computers for virtually everything. The amount of employees actually doing stuff in the park is little to none, and a lot of money is dumped on trying to acquire state-of-the-art tech. Now, if I were doing a sales pitch to an investor, all this state-of-the-art stuff, all this whatever, it sounds really promising. But to really sell this product, we gotta make sure that these guys don't know about computers and then sprinkle in a bunch of funny-sounding words to hopefully hide the large amount of bugs crawling in the system. Or, flaws like how the entire codebase is understood by one person and only one person. It's this guy named Dennis Nedry. If not all, he did most of the implementation on the back end. Having one person write an entire codebase isn't the end of the world by itself, believe it or not. However, it could be an absolute pain for anyone else trying to read through it later. Especially if it's riddled with weird naming conventions, no comments, and also uses weird libraries that could come from God knows where. You know what, though? It's not the end of the world, like eventually you could get around to understanding everything. We even got ChatGPT nowadays to decipher those ancient hieroglyphs that you just spawned out of the keyboard. Unfortunately, this is the 90s, and to double down on all the crappiness, Jurassic Park also seems to have some awful working conditions. As it turns out, the only guy who understands the source code is also a malicious actor. Not only is Nedry given the most vague info about what he's even contributing to, he's also underpaid by his very scummy employer. So imagine being given the following assignment. Write a database that can hold 3 billion records. Design a module for record keeping. Design a module for visual display. Oh, and don't tell anyone else that we do things with DNA. By the time that he realizes he's helping develop a dino theme park, too much work has already been done to go back and refine anything. It's this treatment that leads him to putting malware into the park and stealing company assets as a way to actually get a decent pay. Before doing that, he does make sure to wipe all of his logs in the console, but was seemingly unaware of a key check program that was running in the background. From there, he executes his malware by hiding it in an object file, which upon execution, totally wipes out the power. This might be confusing at first glance, since an object file shouldn't be able to execute anything on the system. Although it is explained in the book when Nedry's scheme is uncovered by the others in the control room. It turns out that he found a way to disguise this seemingly innocent file format and sneak a payload into it. Which can be done in real life, by the way. You can disguise an exe as a type of media file, so just be careful if you get emails or direct messages with them, especially if it's from an unknown sender. Regardless, he was able to execute this payload and disable the power with just a couple of lines of code. The primary reason for this attack working so well? Nedry is the only person who designed the park systems with zero scrutiny at all. He could easily add something malicious if he ever wanted to. Since he also doubles as the system administrator, he can wipe all traces of him executing the malware, totally ignoring the fact that he forgot about this key check program that was running on the side. Even then, that's just tracking his command history in the console. You still have to track down what part of the code was flawed. There's really no easy way to track down what parts of the code were manipulated since it's very poorly documented. The other two people that can use the system are another software engineer who ends up acting more like an IT guy, and a geneticist who has probably had to use the computers for his work before. Thing is, they only know how to use the system, not commit changes on the back end. It's good enough, so I guess despite the power being down, they still might have a fighting chance of bringing everything back online. Oh, no, never mind, they both die. As for Nedry, yeah, he doesn't really get a good send-off either. The issue here actually ties in well to the next problem. There is a lot of dependence on the main power. We're looking at the main power management and the entire island, pretty much. That itself isn't the worst thing, surprisingly. What is kind of problematic is the lack of failsafes in the case the main power goes out. So let's say an attacker were to shut off the main power, well, everything gets shut down, including those electrified fences and surveillance equipment. And while the park does have backup power, it's one supply that tries to maintain operations for the entire island, rather than individual backup generators for key safety features like the electric fences and the motion sensors. So pretty much in the case of an outage, it's almost guaranteed that the creatures will break out. The third issue relates to overwhelming complexity. Now this is one of the main points that the novel tries to emphasize a lot, especially at the beginning of every chapter, where we see this diagram that begins to look more incomprehensible as control over the park is lost. Throughout the novel, it is said that the park's founder, John Hammond, is just demanding of more and more things being added to the island. Quick side note, movie Hammond is more lovable than the evil bastard of a man that he is in the book. These two versions of the character are polar opposites, basically. Anyways, with each feature being added, maintaining the already existing infrastructure of the park becomes increasingly difficult. To double down on it, Nedry and other employees seem to be discouraged from bringing up issues with the park. So there's no clear communication about fixing stuff, it's just more and more features being piled. The end result is this group of automated tasks that need to be operating 24/7, but they're haunted by a list of bugs. We even get an entire list in a single chapter, which goes as follows. The animal feeding program resets itself every 12 hours, not 24 hours, and would not record feedings on Sundays. The security system, which controlled all security card operated doors, cut out whenever the main power was lost, and did not come back on with auxiliary power. The physical conservation program, intended to dim lights after 10 p.m., only worked on alternate days of the week. And the automated fecal analysis tool would occasionally state that parasites were living inside of the animals and would automatically dispense medication into the food. Okay, now for the final issue. Assumptions. Do you know how tech CEOs are with AI? Well, take those negative aspects and put them into someone who's obsessed with dinosaurs. Here are some examples. He's very trusting of the modern technology that exists at the time and misuses the hell out of it, pretty much integrating it everywhere without any type of failsafe. He mistreats his employees, opting to underpay them, withdraw crucial info, and refuse to address any issues that they may bring up. It's that overconfidence that eventually backfires in what has to be the biggest L that is taken in this book. They actually managed to implement a population count correctly, but the people at control are just dumb. So at some point there's suspicion of dinosaurs being able to breed on the island. This was initially thought to be false because of this fancy lysine contingency and all the fact that the dinosaurs are female. There is no possible way that the population count could increase. So because of this assumption, they never actually tested the dino tracking thing on the computer to see if the dinos could breed or not. The issue of the counting software stems from the fact that it assumes that only 238 dinosaurs are present on the island. Let's say in reality 239 creatures were present all at once. Well, the computer is working under the assumption that 238 is this magical number, so it would merely check that 238 animals exist and ignore the extra one. By itself, it doesn't consider the case where over 238 dinosaurs exist. That is, unless the user were to explicitly tell the computer that. Unfortunately, we are dealing with meatheads who assume that this is some type of magical number set in stone, so they never do any additional testing. So one of the visitors in the park named Ian Malcolm decides to do a bit of trolling. He's a chaos mathematician who is the most pessimistic about the park. Naturally, he's not going to pass up on an opportunity to roast the old evil CEO guy. So he's like, hey, try to find 238 dinos. Okay, that seems to be normal. Yeah, alright, everything's good so far. Now, try to find 239 just for the funnies. Oh, what the fuck? And you know, just to add some salt on the wound, 300 dinosaurs, why not? Oh, and see, it was very much just a bug. Oh, what the hell? As doomed as the park is, we're gonna try to find a couple fixes for the major issues. If there's two things that everyone hates, it's spaghetti code and bugs. Not fun to deal with. To be fair, this is more at the fault of the evil Walt Disney for treating his employees like trash. It is very much possible for a software engineer to come across someone who's just not well versed in tech. At times it just leads to ignorance. In the worst case scenario, it leads to some pretty unrealistic demands. What sucks is that this isn't something that you can really control yourself. So the options either come down to sucking it up or quitting. You're most likely to take the first one, because usually the second option is not viable at all. I don't know what else to say here. Really pay your employees or else you'll be a free lunch for a bunch of compies. Yeah, no, the improvement here is just going to be Merc John Hammond. Why does this dude run the company? While they're also at it, they should probably redo how the power management is done. Rather than have everything be tied to the main power, a lot of key operations should be kept separate. Have the tracking and surveillance systems separate from the main power. And in case of emergencies, the electric fences should run on their own power that is provided by some type of maintenance shed for each respective enclosure. Along the way, more communication wouldn't hurt between the scientists and the people back at control. Issues should be openly addressed rather than being swept under the rug so proper security measures can be made for different species. Oh, and probably the most important one, thorough testing on the software. Yeah, for whatever reason, edge cases and accounting software just wasn't considered at all. Instead of ignoring it, tell the computer to search for -1, 0, 100, 238, 239, maybe 1,000 creatures, just to be sure this thing runs properly. There's probably a ton of others that I missed, but yeah, the book surprisingly holds up well 30 years later. In fact, much of it could be applied to the current AI discourse right now. Even the movie manages to carry some of that cautionary tale elements over. You know, the idea of having a dinosaur theme park being operated by using only computers isn't inherently bad. Where that vision becomes skewed, though, is when you start to blindly trust the technology and believe that it is incapable of error. So we have Novel Hammond, who is someone who is overconfident in his company's bio and software engineering work. But in doing so, he completely fails to consider what mistakes may arise in the process. I don't even think he acknowledges the idea of failure. So he ends up with these automated park operations that are nothing but buggy messes. His deluded dreams actually end up having a global effect too, since by the end of the book it is revealed that some of the dinosaurs managed to escape off the island and make their way over to the mainland. We could sort of connect this to something like AI usage today. The same sentiment could be held in this case. The idea of AI is not bad in hindsight. It can solve mundane tasks quickly. It can fill in blanks that we may struggle to write in, and overall it's a very convenient option. Where it gets murky, however, is when we start to apply it, especially in a certain area regarding LLMs, which I should note is a type of AI, not AI itself. It's just that LLMs are what you primarily think of when you hear the term artificial intelligence. The concerns start to arise when we consider how it's applied by firms. Like with many businesses, there's a lot of overconfidence in the capabilities of AI, which ultimately backfires when you let a coding agent go through your entire cloud database and hit the giant red button for deleting the entire system. It's that failure to acknowledge the possibility of errors which leads to embarrassing fumbles like this to begin with, and every consumer ends up suffering as a result. If there's one thing you should take away from this video, it's that life as a software engineer or developer is far from stress-free. It's also the reason why personally, I wouldn't be able to survive a job at somewhere like Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, or any type of big tech company. Jurassic Park is like if you took one of those jobs but discard every potential benefit of taking such a position, which is like the sole reason why people go for CS related jobs to begin with. But yeah, this video was definitely an experience. I want to go to sleep now, so I'm gonna do that. Anyways, have a good day or night. See you.